Welcome to Haunted Graves After Dark, where the coldest nights are the ones touched by the dead. Before we begin, comment where you're watching from. The old cemetery on the outskirts of Reykjavik was not supposed to move. It had been frozen in place for more than a century. Iron gates, rusted solid, stones sunk deep into the permafrost, and names worn away by wind that carried the bite of the North Atlantic. Locals avoided it, even in daylight. Children whispered that the gate rattled when no one touched it. Elders said the spirits buried under the basalt soil never slept. But for the longest time, nobody had proof. Not until that night in 1991, when the gate opened on its own at exactly midnight. The man who saw it first was Arne Sigurdsson, a night shift custodian at the Reykjavik University Library. He took the same walking route every night down the icy slope, past the silent houses with their yellow-lit windows, and then by the cemetery's black iron fence. He always walked faster near the graveyard, not because he believed in ghosts, but because the place made him feel watched. As if the dead had nothing better to do during the long winter nights than stare at the living through the bars. That night was different. The cold was harsher, sharper. The air didn't smell like winter, it smelled like metal, old and wet. As if the ground had been disturbed, Arne's boots crunched on the icy path. He tugged his scarf higher around his face and glanced at the gate out of habit. He stopped the gate. Normally chained shut and frozen stiff, was moving. Not wide, dramatic swings. Not the kind you'd blame on the wind. It shifted the way a sleeping person shifts under the blankets, slowly, subtly, as if turning over. Arne squinted. The moonlight hit the iron just right, revealing frost falling from the hinges like tiny crystals. He watched, breath fogging in the air. The gate twitched again. This time, one hinge gave a long, low groan. Arne stepped back. No, not that. But the gate didn't care what he wanted. It eased open half an inch, then another. A soft metallic scrape echoed across the empty street. He should have run. He knew he should have. Every instinct screamed at him, but curiosity made him lean in, watching as the gate reached a final position, open, just wide enough for a person to step through. Arne felt the hair rise on his arms. He swallowed hard. "Is someone in there?" he called. No answer. Just the wind, brushing the tops of the dry grass, making a sound almost like whispering. He raised his flashlight and shined it between the bars. Something moved deeper inside. Quick, low. Like a figure ducking behind a stone marker. Arne gasped and stumbled back. His flashlight flickered once, twice, and then steadied. "Who's there?" he shouted again. His voice cracked with fear he couldn't hide. This time, he heard footsteps, slow, dragging footsteps, moving closer. The crunch of dead grass, the brush of fabric, a faint, wet breathing. Arne felt the cold reach into his chest. Something inside that cemetery was walking toward him. He turned to run, but before he took a full step, a deep voice called his name. Arne. The sound froze him in place. His heart slammed so hard it hurt. That voice, slow, familiar, and belonged to his brother, Jahan. His brother who had died 4 years earlier after slipping on ice near the docks. His brother whose body had been buried in this very cemetery. Arne shook his head violently. No, this isn't real. But the voice came again. "Arne, help me." He forced himself to look back into the graveyard. The flashlight beam shook in his trembling hand, sliding over headstones until it landed on a figure standing between two birch trees. The silhouette was unmistakable, broad shoulders, the same posture but blurred, like a memory half-remembered Jehan. Arnie whispered. The figure didn't move forward. Instead, it raised one arm and pointed deeper into the graveyard toward a cluster of very old graves. Graves Arnie had never noticed before. Graves with stones so weathered they barely looked like markers anymore. Arnie took one step forward, then stopped. His breath clouded in front of him as he whispered, "What do you want?" The figure didn't answer. It only pointed, hand rigid, unwavering. Then Arnie noticed something he hadn't at first, something that turned his stomach. The ground beneath those old graves was moving. The soil, hard as rock minutes earlier, shifted upward like something was pushing from below. His light caught the faintest stirring, crumbling earth, lifting ever so slightly with each pulse. Arnie backed away so quickly he slipped on the frost. He scrambled up, looking once more at the figure under the birch trees. It was gone. The gate slammed shut behind him with a sharp, balent clang that echoed down the empty street. Arnie didn't remember running home, only the feeling that something was following him, breathing behind him, watching from the corners where moonlight couldn't reach. That night, he tried to convince himself it was stress, fatigue, imagination, but he dreamed of the cemetery again and again. In each dream, the soil pushed a little higher. In each dream, the gate creaked open wider. And in each dream, a whisper crawled through the cold. "Help me." By the time Arnie returned to the cemetery the next night, the gate wasn't just open. It looked like something had crawled out. Arnie stood in front of the cemetery again the next night, breath clouding in the freezing Reykjavik air, his fingers buried in his coat pockets to stop them trembling. He didn't want to be here. Every part of him screamed to turn around and pretend none of it happened. But the dreams hadn't let him. He had opened his eyes that morning with the certainty that if he didn't return, something worse, something he couldn't name, would come for him instead. The gate looked different. Now, the frost on the bars had melted into thin, glistening streaks of water, like the metal had been warmed from the inside. The padlock lay on the ground, twisted in a way that didn't make sense. It wasn't broken. It was bent, reshaped, as if a giant hand had squeezed it between metal fingers. Arnie stopped a few steps away. The cold air scraped at his throat as it whispered, "Han, if that was you, if that was real." Nothing answered him. No voice from the trees. No shifting silhouettes in the fog. The cemetery was silent in that suffocating way only winter nights in Iceland could be, soundless, breathless, waiting. He raised his flashlight and stepped through the open gate. The first thing he noticed was the trail. The snow had been disturbed. In a long, dragging pattern. Something had come out, something heavy, something that didn't walk so much as pull itself along. Deep grooves cut through the surface, leading from the cluster of ancient graves all the way to the gate. And then out onto the road. Arnie swallowed hard. This isn't possible. He followed the drag marks slowly, every crunch of his boots sounding too loud. His heart thudded painfully against his ribs, and his breath came shallow, shaky. The flashlight beam trembled across the stones, catching on strips of frost, on bare branches. On disturbed earth, that same patch of ground from the night before. Old graves looked worse now. The soil wasn't moving this time. It had opened. One grave, one of the oldest, had a hole torn into it, the dirt shoved aside as if something had clawed its way up from beneath. The wooden coffin inside had cracked, splintered from a force pushing outward. Arnie stepped closer, against every instinct that told him to run. The smell hit him first, damp, old, earthy, like a cellar that hadn't seen air in centuries. He traced the beam of light across the broken coffin. Something inside had been buried wearing fabric, a kind of cloak, almost monk-like, rotted 2 strands. Beneath it, the skeletal remains lay half exposed, or they should have been skeleton, but the ribcage was missing. Arnie covered his mouth, taking shallow breaths through his fingers. His throat felt tight. "What happened to you?" He knelt, Dowell shining his flashlight into the hole. The dirt wasn't disturbed like it would have been if someone had dug from above. It had exploded from below. He leaned closer, pushing aside loose soil. "There's something small, something round, something." Hard. He picked it up. A human tooth, fresh, not yellowed or brittle. Not ancient. Not belonging to the skeleton in the grave. His breath hitched. He dropped the tooth as if it burned him. The drag marks made sense now. Something had come up, something human-sized, something not fully decomposed, and it had left the cemetery. "What do you want from me?" Arnie's voice cracked in the dark. The wind answered with a low groan that made him flinch. He turned quickly, scanning the headstones. Shadows stretched in long, skeletal shapes. Trees creaked as the cold tightened their branches. His flashlight flickered once, twice, then steadied. He forced himself deeper into the graveyard. He needed to know more. Something about this place, these older graves, didn't match the rest of the cemetery. The stones had no runes or names, only strange symbols carved so faintly he almost missed them. Circles, lines, something like a sun with too many spokes. He leaned closer, brushing frost from one with his glove. It wasn't just a symbol. It was a seal someone had carved hundreds of years ago to keep something inside the ground. Arnie stepped back, chest tightening with dread. "Why did he open now?" he whispered. The wind died. The silence grew heavy. Then light footsteps, bare, soft, almost gentle. Coming from behind a row of stones to his left, Arnie froze. His heartbeat seemed to echo inside his skull. He raised his flashlight slowly toward the sound. Nothing, just snow and stone. Then the footsteps came again. Behind him this time. He swung the light around fast. Still nothing, but he had heard it. Not animal steps, not the light skittering of a fox. These were human, but the cemetery was empty. He took a shaky breath. "Jon, is it you again?" His voice echoed strangely, not repeating the way normal sound should, but twisting, like something unseen was mimicking it just half a beat too late. Then he saw it, on the far side of the cemetery, near the birch trees. Where he had seen the silhouette the night before, a figure stood perfectly still, not moving, not breathing, just watching. Arnie's flashlight beam landed on the figure, and for a moment he hoped Pradette was Jon again. But this figure was wrong, too tall, too thin, limbs slightly crooked, as if joints didn't bend the way they should. Arnie's breaths caught in his chest. The figure stepped closer. One stopped, then another. The beam revealed its face, or what was left of one. Half of it looked human. The other half looked torn, scraped raw, as if it had clawed through earth with its own cheek dragging through the soil. Mud clung to its eyelashes. Frost coated its mouth, and its eyes. Its eyes were open, alive, cold. It reached a hand toward him, fingers muddy, nails cracked and torn. Arnie stumbled backward, falling onto the frozen ground. The impact knocked the breath out of him, but he scrambled to his feet. his flashlight shaking violently in his hand. The thing took a slow, dragging step toward him. Then it spoke, not in its own voice, but in Jehan S. Arnie. "Help me." He ran. He didn't look back, didn't breathe, didn't think. He just ran until the gate slammed behind him with a metallic echo that carried down the empty street. He didn't see the creature stop at the edge of the cemetery. He didn't see it turn, its head with an unnatural tilt. He didn't see it smile, but he would, because it wasn't trapped in the cemetery anymore, and it knew his name. The moon slipped behind a slow-moving cloud, dimming the world just enough that the cemetery's outlines softened into something unreal. Ira pulled her coat tighter, breath fogging as she stared at the gate that lay half-open behind them. Jehan kept the lantern raised, its flame jittering in the breeze like it wanted to run away. "You heard it too," he whispered, voice barely more than breath. The voice, it said someone's name. Ira nodded. "Magnus Shimermor." But nobody has been buried with that name here in decades. The night air felt heavy now, too heavy, like the atmosphere itself was pressing closer. A sound drifted from deeper inside the graveyard. Not footsteps, not wind, but shifting, as if soil itself were turning under unseen hands. Jehan swallowed hard. We should go back to the house and listen." Ira lifted her hand. Silence, then clink, metal against metal. The gate behind them trembled once, just once, as if remembering it had more work to do. Jehan exhaled. "That wasn't the wind." Ira didn't answer. She was staring at the row of graves to their right. Something was wrong with one of the headstones. Its shadow was stretched long, too low, reaching across the ground even though the moon wasn't in the right place to cast it that way. She stepped closer. The grass around the grave was flattened in a perfect circle. Not trampled, weighted down, like something had lain there for hours, or someone. Ira knelt, brushing her fingers over the frozen blades. "It's warm," she whispered. Jehan's S. lantern flickered violently as if reacting. "Ira, don't touch it." She stood again, eyes narrowing. Something rose from this grave. Recently? That's not possible. Jehan stepped back, clutching the lantern. "Bodies don't just get up and walk," a voice cut him off. But it wasn't a human voice. It scraped, like frozen branches dragged across stone. Ira, her blood, turned to ice. It came from behind her. Right behind her. She spun, but nothing was there. Only tombstones, bare black trees, and Jehan's terrified expression. He whispered, "It said your name?" She nodded, trembling only on the inside. "I heard." Another sound rose then, low and rhythmic, like someone breathing beneath layers of soil. The ground near the gate quivered, not violently, but in a steady pulse, almost like a heartbeat. Jehan took a shaky step back. "We're leaving. I don't care what lore you're chasing. I don't care what you think we heard." The gate opened. At midnight, fine, but whatever is happening now, it's not for us. Ira hesitated. Part of her wanted to agree. Part of her wanted to run until the cemetery was a memory. But then she saw it. A trail, thin lines in the frost drag marks, long and straight as if something heavy had been pulled across the ground. They started at the disturbed grave and moved toward the trees at the cemetery's far edge. "Something crawled out," she whispered. "It didn't walk, it dragged itself." Jehan's voice cracked. "Why would you say that out loud?" Because she needed to hear the truth. She needed him to hear it too. The trail disappeared into the tree line. Darkness pooled between the trunks like ink. The lantern wasn't strong enough to chase it back. Ira's instincts screamed to follow Jehan's instincts. Screamed to flee. He tugged her sleeve. Ira, listen to me. Please. Whatever came out of that grave is still nearby. It might be watching us. We go after it, we're done. Ira bit her lip. The cold stung her lungs. Her heart felt like it was pushing against her ribs. But before she could answer, thump bows froze. The sound came from the gate. The metal frame shuddered again as if struck from the other side, tump and slow and heavy and measured. Sean whispered. Something is trying to push it open again. Ira shook her head. No, look. The gate wasn't opening. It was being pushed closed. Something wanted them inside. The iron bars creaked as the gate inched inward, the hinges groaning under the unnatural pressure. Jehan dropped the lantern. The flame sputtered but stayed lit on the ground. Run. Ira grabbed his arm. Not toward the trees. Whatever dragged itself away could be there. The gate slammed shut behind them with a sound that echoed through the night like a gunshot. Both spun around. The gate didn't just close. It locked. The internal bolt slid into place without a single human touch. Ira felt every muscle in her body tighten. We're trapped. Jehan's breathing grew rapid. This isn't real. This isn't happening. But it was. From the tree line, something stepped out. Slow. Deliberate. Not fully seen only. Its silhouette. Tall. Bent. Arms too long. Head cocked at an unnatural angle. Jehan whispered, "What? What is that?" The figure twitched. Ira felt the air around her grow bitter cold. Their lantern flame shrank as if trying to hide, and then the figure's head snapped toward them, with a sound like breaking ice. Ira's heart stopped. "Jehan," whispered Ira. "It's coming." Ira grabbed the lantern, pulled Jehan behind a row of gravestones, and whispered, "Don't breathe loud. Don't move. Whatever that thing is, it knows our names." And for the first time since they stepped inside the cemetery, Ira understood one terrible truth. The gate didn't open to let something out. It opened to let them in. The air inside the cemetery had grown thicker, heavier, almost solid, as if the night itself had become a presence. Ira's fingers gripped the lantern so tightly that her knuckles whitened. Every sound seemed amplified, the wind whispering. Through twisted birch trees, snow crunching faintly under invisible steps. The faint metallic groan of the gate behind them. Jehan crouched beside her, eyes wide, trying to peer past the gravestones into the darkness. "I don't understand," he whispered. "Why us? Why now?" Ira didn't answer. She could feel the gaze of something ancient pressing on her from every shadow. She could almost hear the rhythm of a heartbeat buried beneath the snow, slow and heavy, pulsing like the ground itself was alive. Then movement. A figure emerged from behind a leaning tombstone. Not the same grotesque silhouette from the trees this. One, smaller, hunched, almost human. Its face was hidden beneath a hood, but the edges of the garment fluttered as if it breathed independently. It stepped forward in uneven, deliberate movements. Ira froze. Jehan instinctively raised his arm to shield her. The hooded figure stopped a few meters away. It tilted its head. One arm lifted. Its gloved fingers pointed at the broken grave, the one with the dragged earth and the missing ribcage. Ira whispered, "It wants us to look." Jehan shook his head. "No, we stay away. We leave." But curiosity had its own gravity, and Ira felt herself pulled toward the grave. Every instinct screamed against it, but she couldn't stop. The lantern's light trembled in her hand, illuminating the broken wood and disturbed soil. The earth beneath the coffin shivered. Small stones skittered across the frost as if the soil itself were breathing. Then a low groaning sound rose from within the hole, deep and guttural, resonating in their bones. Jayan grabbed her arm. "This is insane. We leave now." The groaning intensified, and then a hand burst through the snow-dusted soil. Not skeletal, not decayed. Flesh, pale and slick, with frozen dirt clinging to the wrist. It grasped upward, clawing at the cold air. Ira's scream caught in her throat. The hand pulled itself fully out of the ground, revealing a figure half buried in frost and shadow. Its eyes opened black, endless, reflecting the lantern's trembling flame. It emitted a sound that was neither human nor animal, a sharp, rasping hiss, like metal scraping bone. The hooded figure stepped forward, closer to the creature. For a moment, it seemed to commune with it, hands moving in slow, deliberate gestures. The ground vibrated slightly, and a new sound joined the groaning. Whispers, hundreds of them, rising from the soil, unintelligible but urgent, wrapping around Ira and Jayan like icy fingers. The creature turned its head slowly toward them. Its face shifted, muscles twitching in unnatural ways. It seemed almost aware, alive, yet wrong. Jayan grabbed Ira's hand. "Run, now." She tried to pull free, but something held her. A cold pressure pressed against her chest. The whispers grew louder, more urgent, almost chanting in the rhythm of a heartbeat. Suddenly, the hooded figure raised one hand, palm outward, and the creature froze. Its hiss stilled, the groaning ceased. For an instant, the graveyard became silent, oppressive in a way that made their ears ache. Ira's voice trembled. "What is it doing?" The hooded figure tilted its head and whispered a single word in a language Ira didn't recognize, yet somehow understood. "Bind." The ground beneath them shuddered violently. Frost cracked. Snow swirled into a small vortex around the broken grave. The creature lunged, hands outstretched, but the hooded figure's other hand shot forward. A tether of pale light connected it to the monster, pulling it back. The whisper screamed now, in anger, confusion, despair. Ira felt it in her chest, a cold pressure, a tug at her mind. She wanted to scream but couldn't. Then, as suddenly as it had started, the vortex collapsed. The creature fell to its knees, trembling, bound by unseen forces. The hooded figure turned toward them, tilting its head as if assessing. Jayan whispered, "What? What does it want with us?" Ira shook her head. She couldn't answer. Every instinct screamed to run, but every step back seemed heavier, as if the earth itself resisted. The hooded figure stepped closer, slow and deliberate. Its movements were unnatural, smooth yet jerky, like a marionette with invisible strings. The lantern's light fell across the fabric of its robes. Strange symbols adorned the hem and sleeves lines and circles, interwoven patterns that seemed to move if she looked at them long enough. Then it spoke, not in a whisper this time, but a voice clear and commanding. "The gate opens for those who are bound by what lies beneath. You have seen it. You have felt it. Now you must choose, follow, or remain." Ira glanced at Jayan. His face was pale, sweat frozen along his temples. He shook his head violently. "Follow. Are you insane?" But before she could answer, the bound creature let out a low, mournful wail. Its voice carried grief and rage, echoing in the dark spaces between the tombstones. Arnie, her friend, the custodian, she remembered suddenly. He had vanished after the first night. She realized with horror. Whatever had pulled him into this place was still here, waiting. The hooded figure extended its hand toward the trail of disturbed graves, toward the shadows where whispers curled like smoke. Ira felt herself drawn forward. Despite every nerve screaming to stop, Jihan grabbed her arm again, but she pulled free, compelled. "The gate," she whispered. "It wants to show us something." The hooded figure nodded once, almost imperceptibly, then gestured for them to move. The shadows deepened, stretching toward the broken graves, toward the rising frost. A sudden shiver passed through the air, like the night had exhaled. Arnie's voice echoed faintly from somewhere behind them. "Ira, Jian, don't trust." The silence. The wind carried it away, leaving them trembling. Jahan glanced at her, panic in his eyes. "We shouldn't," but the hooded figure was already moving forward, and Ira knew, in that cold, terrible clarity, that there was no turning back. The gate had opened at midnight. The cemetery had remembered, and now they were part of it. The cold seemed to grow heavier the farther they followed the hooded figure, each step sinking slightly into the frozen soil that refused to be solid. Ira's lantern barely pierced the night, its light trembling across frost-encrusted gravestones, revealing inscriptions long worn away by wind and time. Every shadow seemed alive, bending unnaturally, flicking just out of sight. Jaeon's voice trembled. This doesn't feel right. We shouldn't even be here." Ira clenched her jaw. "We can't stop now. We need to know what's going on. Everything that's happened, it's pointing to something beneath this cemetery." The hooded figure moved ahead silently, and yet the snow beneath its steps seemed untouched. No footprints, no trace like it was floating on air. The bound creature from the previous night shuffled behind, dragging itself slowly, occasionally pausing to moan, its black eyes catching what little light there was. They reached a cluster of tombstones, older than any they had passed before. The ground between them was uneven, broken, almost collapsed in places, as if the earth itself had been hollowed out centuries ago. Ira noticed strange patterns in the frost lines carved in a spiraling shape, perfectly geometric, despite the chaotic burial site around them. The hooded figure stopped at the center. It raised one hand, and the bound creature collapsed to its knees, hissing and trembling, pressing its face to the earth. Then, with a movement both fluid and unnatural, the figure traced a line through the frost, connecting the carvings and the soil. A sudden crack ran through the ground beneath them. Ira stumbled backward, gripping Jahan's arm. "Did you see that?" she whispered, heart hammering. Jahan nodded, his teeth chattering. "The ground, it's alive." A low rumble began to resonate from below, almost like a heartbeat. It wasn't slow, it was rapid, agitated, growing louder with every second. Ira felt it in her chest, a vibration that echoed in her bones. Her stomach twisted in fear. Then the ground shivered violently, and from the center of the pattern, a coffin rose. Unlike the one from before, this coffin was intact. Its polished black wood reflected the flickering lantern light. Chains bound it, thick and rusted, etched with symbols that seemed to writhe when observed too long. Ira stepped closer. Her instincts screamed to stay back, but curiosity overpowered her terror. "It's waiting for someone?" she whispered. The hooded figure's arm swept toward the coffin. The chains rattled on their own. A spectral glow began to seep from the edges, illuminating the carvings in the soil. The bound creature's moans became a high-pitched wail, echoing across the graveyard. Suddenly, a name formed in frost along. The tombstone's Arnie Sigurdsson. Ira's stomach dropped. The custodian who had disappeared after the first night, Jehan's hand gripped hers. Ira, we should leave. Now. Ira shook her head. No. We need to know what's happening. To him. He's part of this. The coffin shuddered. Then, with a terrifying crack, the lid lifted slowly, as if forced by unseen hands. A thin, icy mist poured out, curling toward the night sky and forming shapes that reminded Ira of shadowed human forms. They moved like a silent crowd, writhing. Pressing forward from the mist, a figure emerged. Not fully formed, not entirely corporeal Arni, but wrong. His face was pale, eyes hollow yet bright with an unnatural light. His mouth moved, but no sound came. The hooded figure gestured again, and Arni's movements mirrored them exactly, as if he were a puppet. Ira gasped. He's controlled. Jehan swallowed hard. What is it doing to him? The misted figures rose from the frost, swirling around the coffin like a protective storm. Ira noticed they weren't just shadows, they were pieces of those buried in the cemetery centuries. Go, twisted and incomplete, bound to the soil. Every motion repeated the horrors that had been inflicted upon them. The broken bones, the unmarked graves, the secret burials. The hooded figure pointed to Ura and Jehan. Its voice, when it spoke, was both one and many, echoing in a chorus of whispers. You see now? This cemetery is alive. It binds the restless. It remembers those who disturb it. And it calls those who witness. Ira's heart pounded. But why us? The chains around the coffin tightened with a grinding sound. And Arni's body stiffened. He screamed silently, lips moving rapidly, struggling against the invisible force holding him. The misted figures surged toward him, writhing, tugging, binding. Ira noticed they weren't trying to harm him, at least, not physically. They were forcing him to remember every buried secret, every unsolved mystery. Every life that had ended violently in the cemetery, the memories seemed to pour into him. The hooded figure gestured again, and Arni fell silent. His body slumped, motionless, yet his eyes glowed with the accumulated knowledge of the restless dead. Ira took a step back, whispering, We can't leave him like this." The hooded figure's head tilted slowly, its arms extended toward them, beckoning. The spectral mist swirled, creating a corridor of shadows between the gravestones, leading deeper into the cemetery than they had ever dared to go. Dottery looked at Jehan. "We'd follow. We have no choice." Jehan shook his head. "We have a choice, Ira. Turn back now, while we still can." She turned to the coffin. Arni's head was lifted slightly, his eyes glowing with unearthly light. It was not just him anymore. He was a vessel, a link to whatever force had risen from this ground. "We can't leave him," Ira said firmly. "We have to see it through. Whatever it wants from us, we'll face it together." Jehan exhaled shakily, and together they stepped toward the mist. Every step sent chills up their spines. Every breath carried the icy scent of earth long undisturbed. The whispers grew louder, forming words Ira almost understood. A chant of forgotten names, tragedies, and betrayals. The hooded figure moved ahead, leading them. Arni's form followed, his glow dimming and brightening as if the light inside him had a pulse. The coffin's lid slammed shut behind them with a thunderous bang, echoing across the night, leaving nothing in its wake but shadows, frost, and dread. And then, without warning, the ground beneath them quivered, opening cracks that seemed to lead straight down into darkness. Deeper than any grave should be, Ira glanced at Jayan, and he met her gaze, eyes wide with fear, yet edged with determination. They were no longer visitors to the cemetery. They were participants, bound by curiosity, drawn by the call of the restless dead, and stepping into a night that refused to let them go. The hooded figure paused at the edge of a yawning pit, its arm extended, pointing downward. The whispers turned into a chorus of demands, almost pleading. Ira swallowed hard. We have to go down. Jayan's hands shook, lantern trembling. If we do this, there's no coming back. Ira nodded. Then there's no other choice. And together, with Arnie glowing like a beacon of knowledge and the hooded figure guiding them, they stepped into the darkness beneath the cemetery. The whispers rose into a scream that chased them into the pit, and the earth closed above them, swallowing the night, the stars, and everything they had once known. The darkness beneath the cemetery was absolute. The air was thick, wet, and carried the sharp, metallic scent of earth, freshly disturbed. Ira felt the ground beneath her feet shift subtly as she descended, the lantern casting shadows that danced like specters along the jagged walls of the underground chamber. Jayan stumbled beside her, his breath loud and ragged, the sound swallowed quickly by the cavernous space. Arnie led the way, glowing faintly, his eyes pulsing with an unnatural light. The hooded figure moved ahead, silent as ever, its robes brushing against the frost-encrusted stone walls. The whispers that had followed them above ground now roared in their ears, a tide of voices demanding attention, recounting centuries of secrets that had been buried and forgotten. Ira swallowed hard. What? What is this place? Jayan didn't answer. He didn't need to. The cavern stretched far beyond what the lantern could illuminate. Coffins were stacked along the walls in neat rows, some ancient, splintered, others freshly placed. Each seemed to vibrate slightly, as though the souls within pressed against the wood, desperate to escape or to reach out. A sudden gust of cold air swept through the cavern, extinguishing the lantern's flame. Darkness swallowed them instantly. Ira's pulse raced. She could hear Johannes' panicked breathing, the rasp of his footsteps as he tried to adjust. She fumbled to reignite the lantern, shaking hands, betraying the terror she tried to suppress. Finally, the weak flame flickered back to life, casting a dim circle around them. The hooded figure stopped at the center of the chamber. Its arms rose slowly, commanding, and the surrounding coffins shifted. The ground trembled, sending loose soil and frost drifting into the air. Arnie fell to his knees, his glow intensifying, illuminating rows of skeletal hands pressing against the wood as if demanding release. Then the figure spoke. Its voice was a chorus, simultaneously soft and overwhelming. All who disturb the gate must face what lies beneath. The dead remember. The dead act. The dead will not forgive. Ira's throat went dry. Face? What? What do they mean? Before Jian could respond, one of the older coffins shuddered violently. The lid cracked along the edges, then split open with a deafening pop. From inside, a spectral form erupted, skeletal yet somehow human, the remnants of a body clothed in frost and decayed fabric. Its hollow eye sockets glowed faintly, a pale reflection of Arnie's own light. It didn't move like a person. It moved like a nightmare, limbs jerking in unnatural sequences, spine arching in ways that shouldn't be possible. Its jaw opened, and a voice, a combination of every whisper that had followed them, screeched into the chamber. Ira's legs felt rooted to the ground. She could barely breathe as the creature reached toward them, skeletal hands stretching impossibly long. Jayan grabbed her arm, yanking her backward. We have to move. We can't stay here. They ran, stumbling over frost and broken stone, deeper into the cavern. The hooded figure glided effortlessly ahead, never looking back. Arnie followed, his glow pulsing faster with every step, illuminating. Glimpses of creatures erupting from coffins, each more terrifying than the last. A low rumble shook the chamber. The earth split beneath them, forming jagged fissures, and from these cracks, smaller forms emerged, shadows that seemed to be memories of those buried too quickly, too violently, trapped in the soil. Some reached out, attempting to pull at their leg. Others whispered in voices so desperate it made Ira's ears ache. They reached a circular chamber, walls carved with strange symbols that pulsed with a faint green light. In the center, an enormous coffin rested, bound in chains etched with glowing runes. This one was different. It radiated a cold so intense that frost formed instantly on any surface near it. The hooded figure stopped at the edge of the chamber. Arnie's glow intensified, almost blinding in the dim light. He stepped toward the coffin, moving as if drawn by the same force that compelled the hooded figure. Ira whispered to Jehan, "That coffin. It's the source. Everything is coming from it." Jehan's voice shook. "Then we should leave it alone. We can't stop it. Look at what it's done to Arnie." But Arnie raised his glowing hand, pointing at the coffin. His eyes, empty yet bright, reflected an understanding that chilled Ira to the bone. "It's calling. It's waiting. We must." Before he could finish, the chains binding the coffin shattered in a spray of frost and dust. The lid lifted slowly, revealing a swirling darkness within, a void that seemed to absorb the weak light of their lantern. From it, whispers rose, not a single voice, but a chorus of centuries, pleading, angry, demanding. The creatures from the other coffins stirred, drawn toward the void, their skeletal hands reaching and clawing. Arnie fell to his knees, screaming silently as the voices poured into him, flooding his mind with visions of ancient betrayals, murders, and secrets buried to protect the powerful. Ira felt the pull too, a sensation that clawed at her very thoughts, threatening to drag her into the darkness. She tried to resist, gripping Giant's arm tightly. We can't let it take us." The hooded figure raised its arms again. The creatures halted, frozen mid-step, as if obeying an unseen command. Then it pointed at Ira. A single word echoed through the chamber, clear above the chaos. "Witness." Ira understood instinctively. She had to see. She had to confront what lay within the darkness, even as her body screamed for her to flee. Jehan shook her arm, terror etched across his face. "Ira, don't. We don't know what this is." But the pull was too strong. She stepped forward, lantern held high, and peered into the void. The darkness seemed to swirl, alive, forming shapes that were both familiar and impossible, faces of those who had been buried here. Twisted in torment, eyes wide, mouths open in silent screams, the hooded figure spoke again. "History will not be ignored. All who enter here must witness the truth of those who were wronged. Only by seeing can the cycle end." Ira felt Arnie's presence behind her, faint but steady. She understood now. The dead weren't merely restless, they were waiting for acknowledgement, recognition, and remembrance. Jehan whispered, almost to himself, We have to help them." Ira nodded, trembling. "Yes, witness, remember. That's the only way." And as she peered into the swirling darkness, the chamber trembled, the whispering rose to a deafening roar, and the dead began to move, not in anger, not in malice, but as if they were finally being seen, The hooded figure lowered its hands, and the creatures paused, suspended in the moment of recognition. Arnie's glow dimmed slightly, yet he remained steady, as though a bridge had formed between the living and the dead. Ira took a shaky breath. The pull lessened, the whispers softened into murmurs, and the void began to close, the coffin sinking. Slowly back into the frozen earth, the hooded figure turned toward them, bowing its head. Arnie, still glowing faintly, nodded. Ira realized, with both relief and dread, that the trial was far from over. They had survived this encounter, but the cemetery had many more secrets to reveal, and the gate's call was far from finished. Giant exhaled shakily. We did it. Ira shook her head, eyes fixed on the coffin. We've only just begun. The hooded figure vanished into the shadows, leaving them alone in the chamber with Arnie. The echoes of centuries of whispers lingering in the frozen air, and as they stepped back toward the path that would lead them closer to the surface, Ira knew one thing with certainty. The cemetery's secrets were far deeper than any grave, and the night was far from over. The ascent back toward the surface was slower than they expected. Every step seemed heavier, the cavern pressing against them like a living thing. Arnie's glow flickered with exhaustion, yet it provided the only light strong enough to navigate. The jagged stones and frost-covered walls. The whispers lingered, now softer but insistent, like a chorus of unseen mourners, guiding and warning at the same time. Ira's mind raced. The void in the coffin, the swarm of spirits, Arnie's transformation, they were all pieces of something far larger. Something the cemetery had been guarding for decades, perhaps centuries. Every instinct screamed that the hooded figure wasn't their enemy. It was a custodian of this ancient order, a mediator between the restless dead and the living, who dared intrude. Jayon stumbled over a loose stone, catching himself on the wall. I can't believe this is real, he gasped, eyes darting at shadows that seemed to stretch and twist just beyond the lantern's light. Everything we've seen. All of it. Ira shook her head, gripping his arm. We can't focus on disbelief. We need to survive, and we need to understand. That's the only way to make it out alive. A sudden vibration ran through the ground, more intense than before. Frost fell from the cavern ceiling like icy rain. Arnie's glow brightened, pulsing. In rapid succession, he moved ahead, leading them toward a narrower passage they hadn't noticed before. A tunnel carved naturally into the stone, yet lined with strange etchings glowing faintly green. Ira's breath caught. The symbols were similar to those she had seen around the central coffin, lines and circles that seemed to shift when viewed from different angles, almost alive. She traced one with her finger, and the stone shivered beneath her touch. A low hum filled the tunnel, vibrating through her bones. Do you hear that? Jihon whispered, voice tight with fear. Yes, Ira said, teeth clenched. It's calling us. The tunnel widened into another chamber, smaller but more ornate than the previous. Ancient coffins were stacked along the walls like books on a shelf, and at the center was a circular stone platform engraved with a sun-like pattern. Arnie stopped at its edge, his glow illuminating a name etched deeply into the stone. Sigildur Serlix, and Ira swallowed hard. The name felt familiar from old records she had seen at the Reykjavik archives months ago. A missing historian who had vanished while investigating the cemetery decades earlier. The hooded figure appeared silently behind them, a presence more imposing in the confined space. Its hands lifted slowly, palms outward, and the air grew colder still. Frost formed on their clothes, their hair, their eyelashes. Ira could feel it, now an invisible current, pulling at her, tugging not just at her body, but at her mind, memories. Of the cemetery, fragments of legends, whispers of sacrifices and ancient protections swirled inside her head. She staggered, nearly dropping the lantern. Ira, Jahan's voice trembled. It's trying to control our thoughts. She shook her head, fighting the pull. No, I won't let it. We're here to witness. That's all. Witness, learn, and leave. The hooded figure spoke, voice deep and commanding. Witnessing is only the beginning. The gate chooses those who are bound to the dead. The living must pay attention, or the cycle will continue forever. From the rows of coffins, a low hum rose, vibrating through the chamber. Arnie collapsed to one knee, gripping his head. The whispers turned into clear voices, now pleading, angry, crying. They were names of the buried, their lives stolen, secrets. Capdyra realized with horror that the cemetery wasn't just haunted. It was remembering, accounting for centuries of injustice, blood, and betrayal. The coffin at the far end shook violently, splinters flying. The lid lifted, and a skeletal hand shot upward, groping for the ceiling, grasping at the air. A pale mist formed around it, taking shape. The historian, Sigurdur Serlexson, twisted in agony, mouth opening in a silent scream. His eyes glowed, faintly, desperate, seeking release. Arnie, Ira whispered. He's like Arnie, bound to them. The hooded figure extended one arm toward Sigurdur's form. The skeletal figure froze mid-air, the mist swirling around it in response to the figure's movements. Arnie's glow flared, and suddenly, the historian's spirit collapsed to the ground, shivering, then lay still. Ira stepped closer, lantern illuminating the pale, ethereal form. She whispered, "We have to help him. We have to break whatever binds them." Jahan grabbed her arm. "Do you even know how? This place? It's not natural." But the hooded figure moved toward them, tilting its head. Its voice, soft now, yet resonant, filled the chamber. The living must witness, remember, and acknowledge. Only acknowledgement will calm the restless. Only seeing the truth will free the bound. Ira took a deep breath. She stepped forward, looking at the historian, then at Arnie, then at the coffins lining the walls. She spoke aloud, naming the dead, the stories she had pieced together, the injustices she had learned of from centuries of forgotten records. The whispers rose, louder now, less chaotic, more coherent. The spectral forms of those buried began to stir, not in anger, but in recognition. The chains of frost and darkness that had bound Arnie, and now Sigurdur, loosened slightly. Jahan followed her lead, adding his voice, recounting stories he had overheard, legends of the cemetery, the missing, and the forgotten. Each word seemed to weave a fragile thread between the living and the dead, anchoring them in acknowledgement rather than fear. A sudden gust of wind swept through the chamber. The coffin lids rattled and then slammed shut one by one. The glow around Arnie dimmed, and he fell to the ground, breathing heavily but free from the pull of the dead. Sigurdur's pale form shimmered, then slowly faded, leaving only an imprint of frost on the stone floor. Ira exhaled shakily. Jahan leaned against the wall, eyes wide. Did we do it?" The hooded figure stood silently for a long moment, then slowly, it lowered its arms. A single word echoed through the chamber, almost gentle this time. "Remember." The walls of the chamber seemed to sigh. Frost melted slightly, whispers soft to murmurs, and the oppressive weight of the underground began to lift. Arnie looked at them, exhaustion and relief mingling in his glowing eyes. Ira whispered, It's Not over. But maybe we've passed a test. The hooded figure turned, gliding toward the tunnel they had used to descend. Without a word, it disappeared into the shadows, leaving them alone in the chamber. The glow from Arnie dimmed completely as the whispers faded. Jehan exhaled, relief and lingering fear etched across his face. We survived. Somehow, Ira nodded, lantern trembling in her hands. Yes, but the gate is still here, and there are more who remain restless. The path back to the surface stretched ahead, dark and silent. But the weight of centuries lingered in the stone, in the frost, in the whispers that had not completely faded. They had come face to face with the cemetery's secrets, with its guardians, and with the bound dead. And as they stepped cautiously toward the faint light of the surface, Ira knew the final confrontation was drawing near. The gate had revealed its power, but the truth it guarded, and the final reckoning for those who dared witness, had yet to unfold. The night was far from over, and the cemetery had one last story to tell. The light of the surface was faint, distant, yet it called to them like a promise of safety. Ira, Jayan, and Arnie moved cautiously, every step echoing in the frost-slick tunnels, their breaths misting in the icy air. The horrors below had etched themselves into their memories, and even with the dim glow from Arnie fading, the weight of what they had witnessed pressed upon them. The underground chambers seemed to shift as they walked, corridors stretching and contracting unnaturally, guiding them toward the exit, but also testing their resolve. Whispers surfaced again, soft and insistent, a reminder that the cemetery's secrets were not fully laid to rest. Ira felt them crawling along her skin, tugging at the edges of her mind, yet she pressed forward, heart pounding, lantern flickering dot. Last, they emerged into the outer graveyard. The midnight sky was clear, the stars cold and distant, and the cemetery lay silent, almost serene after the chaos they had endured. The main gate, wrought iron black against the snow, stood closed, yet seemed to hum faintly, as if acknowledging their survival. Ira took a deep breath, letting the cold night air fill her lungs. We made it, but it feels like something is still watching. Jayan nodded, scanning the shadows between the gravestones. It's not over. We've seen what it can do. That gate, that place, it's alive in ways I never imagined. Arnie, now fully visible and no longer glowing, looked at them both. His eyes were haunted, reflecting the memories of the dead he had carried, yet there was a calm determination there as well. The dead need acknowledgement. We gave them that. For now, a sudden movement caught their attention. The hooded figure appeared at the gate, as silent and imposing as ever. It tilted its head, and the air seemed to shift, carrying a faint echo of whispers that were no longer angry or chaotic, but patient and expectant. Ira swallowed hard. Do you think it's satisfied? The figure did not answer in words. Instead, it slowly extended one hand toward them, then lowered it. The subtle gesture felt like a blessing and a warning. The cemetery had granted them passage, but it had not forgotten. Its watch would continue, patient and eternal. Jehan shivered. We shouldn't linger. We should leave before it changes its mind. They moved quickly toward the street, the snow crunching underfoot, the lights of Reykjavik faintly glowing in the distance. The whispers faded behind them, leaving only the memory of what they had experienced, heavy and undeniable. Ira looked back one last time at the gate, black iron silhouetted against the night sky. We came here for answers, she said softly, and we found them. But the cemetery? It's bigger than we could imagine. Bigger than any of us. Arnie nodded, voice low, but steady. The stories of the dead are written in stone, in frost, and in memory. We've learned to see them. That knowledge, it changes you. Jehan exhaled, visibly trembling, yet relief softened his features. Then let's make sure we remember. But we survive. The trio continued down the empty streets, carrying the weight of what they had witnessed, hearts still racing, minds still haunted. Behind them, the cemetery remained silent, seemingly dormant, yet Ira knew better. It was patient, ever watchful. The gate might be closed for now, but it would open again, for those curious or foolish enough to disturb its secrets. As they reached the edge of the city, Ira glanced at Arnie and Jehan. We've faced it, we've seen it, and we survived. But there are stories out there that the world has forgotten. Stories that still want to be remembered. This is only one of many. Jehan nodded, eyes shadowed, but resolute. Then we tell them. Carefully. And we warn others. Ira looked back once more, snow crunching under her boots, shadows stretching long beneath the moonlight. She whispered to herself, the cemetery waits. Always. The night was still. The gate of the graveyard loomed in the distance, silent yet sentient, a guardian of centuries-old secrets. The dead were at peace for now, but the echoes of their stories would linger in the living, carried forward by those who dared witness the truth. And so, the tale ends, not with the dead forgotten, but with the living forever changed. If you've journeyed through the chilling night of Reykjavik with us, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to uncover more stories that dwell in the shadows of history. Comment below where you're watching from, because some secrets demand to be shared, and the dead, somewhere, may be listening.